All right, we are live again. Take two. Welcome to the man. What a venture, Ken. Welcome to the Big Dynasty Energy Podcast episode. You can join today. Country that Kevin Hayes can find. Kevin, take two.
I'm still doing wonderful. I probably just show up as a floating bald dome and with a black background, but doing great.
Good. All right, so yeah, so today, first episode of the channel. I'm really excited for us to finally get to talking about this for a while. We text nonstop and talk about football. It's a good day. So on today's episode, we'll be going through our 2020 Dynasty Love and Hates list at each position: quarterback, wide receiver, back, and tight end, as well as a bold take on what we think is going to happen this year in Dynasty. Kevin, I just want to jump in right away. I guess I'm so. Give us your quarterbacks that you love and your quarterbacks you hate.
Okay. Yeah, my QB love is Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones. For me being a Vikings fan, I'm fresh off watching him slice and dice us in the playoffs, but also I think he's ready to make that leap. So when I'm saying love, I got him rated higher than a lot of the other consensus rankings. And also from a dynasty perspective, I think he's going to be pretty stable for the next 3 years. So I think he's going to take a leap this year and stay there. And I don't know. There's a lot to like. I'm looking at his rushing yards. I'm looking at his rushing touchdowns, especially. And it just kind of reminds me of what you saw with Josh Allen before he took off. Everyone thinks of Josh Allen right now as, the QB1 or the QB2 putting up these amazing numbers. But I can remember when people kind of scoffed at him and thought he was just erratic, when you the game one moment, lose it the next. And I feel like Danny Dimes is he's right at that level to make that leap to actually putting up consistent numbers. And they're getting a little bit more weapons around him too. He's a little bit slower to develop than Allen was, but I think that's just because it's kind of a mess fantasy wise in New York. And I think they're finally starting to get him some weapons, and you're going to see a leap this year.
Yeah, for sure. I really like the draft pick of Jalen Hyatt. I think he's maybe being overvalued in drafts right now, at least in rookie startups. I think you can get him later than he's probably going for at his current ADP. But in terms of Daniel Jones, yeah, I think he's got way too much upside to not want to at least try and target. There's apologies. Still working through day one issues, folks. I think there's a lot of upside with him, like you said, with his rushing capabilities. He beats a lot of teams like the Vikings in the wild card game, and then what was that, week 15 or 16, with his legs. And even though they got Saquon on that 1 year deal, I do think that that's kind of their way of buying time to get their running back of the franchise for the future, locked up. And right now, yeah, they're going to go through some wide receiver carousel, and I think they're going to figure out what works for Danny and then what doesn't work, and start kind of ruling those guys out. So yeah, I like Danny Dimes a lot. I try to get him in our house league. I don't think the seller, I think it's Bud Light, I don't think he's going to get rid of him. But
well, especially not now.
Yeah, especially not now. Especially when Kyler Murray's your QB2. So how about your hate? Who's the guy you hate this year?
My hate, I got to go with Deshaun Watson. I know I've seen a lot of lists expecting him to bounce back this year. They're paying him a lot of money, so I'm sure Cleveland wants him to bounce back. But just with his off the field issues, QB is kind of like kicker. I think those are the two positions where if your head's not in it, it's hard to get back. And I don't see him going back to, everyone wants him to be the Houston version of himself, but he's got Kevin Stefanski as his coach, and the Silver Fox, he loves running the ball. I know they've said they want to change their offense a little bit to be a little bit more Deshaun friendly, but is that going to be natural for Kevin Stefanski when I know that's not the type of offense he likes to run? There's a lot that needs to go together that I just don't see happening. I think he's going to be outside the QB1 ranks at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely see Watson, take the off the field stuff out of the picture. I try to, leave that, to itself. But, looking at this year, looking at the team around him, aside from Amari Cooper and an aging Nick Chubb, there's really not much about this offense that I like. Yeah, you can argue David Njoku is, kind of a mid-tier two tight end in fantasy, but there's not enough that, especially from last year after serving his suspension, that has showed me to make me feel like, okay, that Houston version of Deshaun Watson can come back. Yeah, I mean, I sold him I think before even last year, before his suspension was handed down. Knowing he was going to be suspended for, the most part of a season. But when you miss that much football as he did, it's not where you can just come back and play. It's not like hockey or basketball where you can kind of get back on the ice or back on the court and get back to it. So I definitely see him struggling again this year. He was going to be my QB hate, but once you said you beat me at the QB hate list, so I'm right there with you though. Not a fan of Deshaun Watson this year going forward. So, and then my quarterback that I love this season for Dynasty is Kirk Cousins. So, we talked about Danny Dimes slicing us up in the playoffs. Looking this year at Kirk Cousins and really the next few years as he kind of finishes out his career. This year specifically with the weapons, this is probably his best supporting cast he's had in his entire career. You got Justin Jefferson as his alpha receiver. Rookie Jordan Addison's been looking really good in camp. A lot of good things coming out from camp, and he's getting up to NFL speed quicker than people thought he was going to be. So him filling in that Adam Thielen, wide receiver 2 role is going to be big for not only the team but for Kirk Cousins and Jordan Addison. So and then TJ Hawkinson, and then the stable of running backs, which I really like what Kevin O'Connell's doing, and letting Dalvin Cook walk in free agency. I think that what that does is it makes defenses have to play more honest. We have Alexander Madison, we have, Ty Chandler, we have Kenny Nwangu, and we have rookie Dwayne McBride. They're all different running backs. And so when those guys are, swapping inside and out, that's going to make defenses give Kirk a different look. And I think he's going to do what he did that last year and really just slice up defenses. So I expect a career from him, and I expect a career from Justin Jefferson. So I really like Kirk this year. And then going forward, even like, let's say he's not with the Vikings next year. Where's he going to end up? Probably San Francisco, maybe somewhere else in the NFC West if Matt Stafford leaves the Rams, if he does decide to retire, if they can somehow get out of that contract. It is a little too early to tell. San Fran's probably the favorite, but if Kirk Cousins ends up not re-signing with the Vikings, I do see him going to a contender before him signing another big contract just to get paid. So I like Kirk Cousins, and I can get him relatively cheap both in startups and on trades before the regular season starts.
Yeah, Kirk is kind of everyone's favorite quarterback they love to hate.
Yep.
But he does put up the numbers, and he did that despite Vikings didn't exactly have a pass-friendly offense when Zimmer was coach.
Mm-hmm.
And we've added essentially one more weapon this year versus last year. Last year, Thielen felt like he was kind of on the downside. So now you have 2 receivers with the drafting of Addison and also, I think, Hawkinson. Yeah, 3 legit targets. I think this is probably going to be his best year.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And then on the flip side, the quarterback that I hate, and when I was going through this list, it was really hard for me to jot this name down because I do like him, but there's just a lot of question marks, and that's Tua Tagovailoa. There's a lot of questions on offense. The Tyreek Hill suspension that's kind of looming. We think it's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to happen. This offense takes a big hit without him. Not saying that Jalen Waddle can't help, move this offense forward. And Mike McDaniel down there in Miami, he's doing a really good job with the team. But you take away a guy like Tyreek, and I do think Tua becomes more of an average quarterback, especially where they don't really have a solidified running back room. Sure, they had a couple, Jeff Wilson, he looked good in a couple games last year. They have Raheem Mostert. They fit the McDaniels offense. The rookie running back that they drafted this year, out of who do they draft again this year? They drafted I can never pronounce his name. Devin Achane.
I think it's A-Chain, right?
A-Chain, yeah.
Because I read an article where they're saying, they're going to try to get the A-Train nickname for him.
Yep. Yeah, so he was a Texas
if he doesn't suck.
Right. I mean, Texas A&M running back, but at 5'9", 188 pounds, he's not a 3-down back that you're expecting to back up a guy like Tua. He's not like Saquon up in New York to help Danny Dimes out when he's having a bad game throwing the ball. You kind of have this, running back room of misfits, so to speak. So for me to be big on Tua this year and going forward, I can't buy in, especially with the medical concerns. He's had a couple concussions over the last 2 years. who knows? I mean, he could, pull an Andrew Luck and, finish practice one day and say, guys, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. So Tua definitely is the guy that's on my list of avoid in all drafts. And also, if I get any sort of trade offer with Tua in it, I'm hitting decline before I can even see the rest of the trade. So,
I was hating on Tua last year, and I made some questionable dynasty trades that burned me because I thought Tua was just going to tank. So
mhm.
it's hard for me to doubt on Tua after last year. The injury concerns are definitely there, but that offense is a speed kills type of offense, and I don't know, it just feels like it's kind of like a Maserati, and they're handing him the keys. So I I hear what you're saying, but I'm afraid to hate on Tua because I could also see him blowing up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just for me, it's one leg of the track team goes down, and all of a sudden they're in fourth place in the race. And in this AFC East division, there's just no time to slow down. You got to keep moving forward. So again, I think you can go either way with this one. For me, I'm avoiding Tua. So all right, so on to the running backs. Running back that I absolutely love this year, and I know you've seen in our house league. You tried to actually trade this guy, but with the contract restructuring, with what the team did not do in the draft, and that was take a running back early on. That Cincinnati Bengal Joe Mixon. I really like what he brings to the table. People sleep on this guy. He has been a top 10 quarterback consistently. I mean, going and looking at his historics from the last couple of years, this guy is very consistent for a running back when he can stay healthy. I'm pulling up his historicals, and Sleeper's not giving me what I want, but I mean, last year he was I think top 12, top 14 running back, and that's all he's got to be. I mean, if you're playing in a league that PPR or even half point PPR, last season Joe Mixon saw a career high in both targets and receptions, and I expect that number to go up for a few reasons. One, I think with Joe Burrow getting hurt during camp already this season and being out, nothing serious, and we hope that he gets healthy sooner rather than later. But the fact that Joe got hurt so soon, I think that's going to make Zach Taylor want to get the ball out of Joe's hands a lot sooner, especially earlier on in the season. Once they get to December and games really start to matter, I think it's going to be whatever they have to do, they're going to do. But they want to get the ball out of Joe's hands quick. They don't want to force him to get hurt. And Samaje Perine is now in Denver playing with Russell Wilson, Bronco country, let's ride. So there's really no competition behind them. They drafted Chase Brown out of Illinois in the 5th round. At 5'9", 215, there's really no competition for me there. I see Mixon being the every down back with him taking a pay cut within the last week or two. He's this team's running back one going forward. And again, I don't think Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Hayden Hurst is gone now. He's in Carolina. There's not as many mouths to feed in Cincinnati, I think, than there are other teams for running back value. And right now, I think people are looking down at Mixon as this low end RB2, where I'm looking at him as a low end RB1. So I know you're smirking. What's your take on Joe Mixon?
I have him as a low end RB2.
That's what I
But yeah,
figured.
a lot of people are expecting this is the year of decline, and it
Hmm.
might not be. He's definitely had a few good years out there. So it's a lot of assumptions driving him down. So I
For
guess we'll
sure.
see.
For sure. Yeah. And for me, the assumption that I'm making and the reason why I'm all in on Mixon is simply the fact that he is going to get a ton of volume. And I'll take volume and opportunity over anything else. Any other statistical category, I'll take opportunity over anything. So love Joe Mixon. Who I do hate, who I would have loved if he had been traded to any other team during the NFL draft in April, is DeAndre Swift. I
Hmm.
absolutely, and being a Vikings fan, watching him in the NFC North the last couple of years, there's a few reasons why I don't like DeAndre Swift. But these are the main reasons. One, Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts last year led the NFL in quarterback rushing attempts. They recently signed Rashad Penny, who I think if he can stay healthy, he is just as good of a 3 down back as anyone in this league. Just for him, the biggest thing is injuries. And Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell are still in Philly. So those change of pace downs, or when Philly isn't running the way that they expect to, they're going to throw those guys in because they've been with Philly forever. So I don't trust DeAndre Swift. I think with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown and Dallas Goddard, and then you throw in the rushing attempts by Jalen Hurts. There's too many mouths to feed. This is the exact opposite of what I was talking about with Joe Mixon. You have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. That's Mixon's main competition. DeAndre Swift has that much competition just in the running back room. Then you throw in two Pro Bowl, All Pro, borderline All Pro wide receivers on the outside, plus tight end one. I really don't like DeAndre Swift, and that's not even putting in the whole injury concerns with him. I think he's probably missed more games than he's played the last 2 years. So DeAndre Swift, again, I would have bought him if he would have went to basically any other team besides Philadelphia during draft day, but I just can't get in on him this year. I know some people have him ranked pretty high because he's still a pass catching back, but what are your thoughts on Swift?
I think Philly is a good football backfield, but probably a very frustrating fantasy backfield.
Yeah,
He might be great, but also I can definitely see the same thing from Penny. So it's kind of a roll of the dice, and it depends on how far he falls. But yeah, if you're investing a big pick into him, it's very risky.
agreed. All right, well let's look at your running back since you had Mixon as the low end RB1. Let's see what RB1s you have ranked higher than him. Or I'm sorry, back in RB2 Mixon. What running back do you love this season?
Well, my running back love, it's I guess he's not that low on people's lists, but I'm definitely higher on him than most lists I've seen is Nick Chubb. You know, I think a lot of people would agree he's a great running back, but it feels like I'm not seeing as much love as I would expect for him. I mean, it feels like this is the moment we've been waiting for with Nick Chubb. Everyone's always been so pissed that Kareem Hunt takes away all his opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
that he's just in there for the running downs, and then Kareem Hunt comes in for the passing downs. Well, Kareem is gone for now. Who knows? He's still out there. Maybe he comes back, but I feel like this is the moment we've been waiting for. We should be more excited about more opportunities for Nick Chubb. He's 27, but I'm gonna say that's in human years. In running back years, I feel like he's a little bit less because he hasn't had it. We act like he's a big workhorse running back, but because Kareem Hunt's been in there, he hasn't had the number of carries as a lot of these other guys. I look back, I just assumed he always had a bunch of carries. He's only had more than 300 carries once. You look at some of the other big names out there, like Derrick Henry, he's carrying it 350 times a year, and Nick Chubb's been carrying it in the 200s for the most part. So I feel like he doesn't have that many miles on him. He could still be very effective, I think, for the next few years. And I think this is the year that he actually does a little bit more. Maybe he actually gets to have the opportunity to catch a few passes because they're not rotating Kareem Hunt in as much. So I think it's going to be a big year for Nick Chubb.
Yeah, and I like Chubb too. The one thing I look at is his value. I mean, if you're looking at his current trade value per fantasy pros, for Dynasty, he's sitting at a trade value of a score of 55, which is in the same range as Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, and Kenneth Walker. There's a little bit of a drop off down to Austin Eckler, who's at 46, who I think that's a little egregious. I do think Nick Chubb, you're paying a premium, but if there is an older back that I am going to pay for, it is that Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler tier. Again, I think he's just in that situation, kind of like where Joe Mixon is. There's really not that many mouths to feed, and he's just going to get a ton of volume. Plus, he's established. In a guy like Nick Chubb, you know what you're getting. You're going to get a guy who's going to get the ball 22 to 27, 28 times a game, and he's going to get the majority of the goal line carries. So I wouldn't argue trading away a young player like a Najee Harris in a late 2025 pick. You're overpaying at that point per trade value, and I'm not also afraid to take Nick Chubb late first round, turn of the second round, again simply because of the volume that he's going to get in Cleveland.
Well, and then moving on to my hate, this guy could definitely burn me, but I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker.
Mm,
I had him in my redraft league last year, and no complaints. Loved him. Uh, but the one thing, he's not catching any balls. And I can remember a few times just staring at my Team Stream app, watching, the big red logo comes in. They're in the red zone, first and goal from the 3,
hmm
second and goal from the 3, third and goal from the 2, and all of a sudden they're passing for the touchdown. It felt like his two weaknesses was he had trouble punching it in the end zone when it was short yardage and not getting catches. And
hmm
then they go out there and they draft Charbonnet, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right.
Yep.
He's looks like a big bruising back that can get those short yards and also caught a lot of balls in college.
Yes, he did.
Um, so it feels like the olden days, just going a few years back with Seattle, where back in the days when everyone was so upset because Russ couldn't cook, we were preventing him from cooking. Now he's cooking, but back in those days, all Pete Carroll wanted to do was run the ball, and they had
Except on the 1 yard line in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady and the Patriots. Except then. Except then.
yeah, yeah, and I'm going past the Marshawn years right into when they had Rashad Penny as kind of like the shiny toy
Yep.
that was always getting hurt, and then Chris Carson was more of kind of the bruiser. It felt like people were afraid to draft Chris Carson for a while until they finally realized he was good. And it felt like the Seahawks actually preferred Chris Carson more.
Hmm.
I feel like Charbonnet could be the Chris Carson that walks in here. Um, and so I'm a little worried that he might end up taking a little bit of the shine away from Kenneth Walker. And it's just, I think Seattle is just going to be kind of a crappy fantasy team. They're going to be a
Hmm.
good football team, but they
Yep.
just have too many toys in the toys chest. Lots of options. I think that it might be frustrating if you're looking for one guy to shine from Seattle just because of all the options they have.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, and when you look at, especially if you're doing a startup in Dynasty, Kenneth Walker currently is his ADP is 22. He's RB8 per Fantasy Pros. I think I had him in the middle teens in my early preseason rankings. So above him, you got Jahmyr Gibbs at 16, RB6, Austin Eckler at ADP 17, RB7. Kenneth Walker then comes in at RB8 at ADP 22. Najee Harris is ADP 23, RB9, and then you got Josh Jacobs at ADP 29, RB10. I'm taking every single one of those running backs over Kenneth Walker, and I think Zach Charbonnet is the big reason why. But this is the other thing that I was thinking about before the show was how much longer is Pete Carroll going to be running this team? Pete Carroll, he really has developed this culture that the Seahawks and the Seattle fan base hasn't had since the early 90s, back when they were relevant last. How much longer does that last? And, does a new head coach come in the next year or two and a new OC come in that say, hey, we don't want to have a guy like Kenneth Walker, who's more of kind of that early first, 1 and 2 down back. And we want to go to what, the Jaguars are doing with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, or what the Vikings are doing with a stable of, 5 running backs. So I'm with you. I'm out on all Seattle running backs this year simply because it's not talent, it's not the player, it's a situation. So
I know Pete Carroll's getting old. I don't actually know his age, but he's got to be getting old. But he's kind of like those when you'd see the infomercials in the mid '90s, the old guy that's like has the juice bar or whatever. He has an absurd amount of energy for his age. So I don't know if traditional human age applies to him. So I think he's still got a few more years left, but who knows?
yeah, Pete Carroll is 71.
Okay.
And he definitely does act, I will give you that, he does act like he's a mid-50s coach, where when you look at Bill Belichick, I'm pretty sure he's right around the same age. Yeah, he's 71 as well. So you look at the demeanor, you look at the character and the energy. Yeah, Pete Carroll definitely does have I think the younger side on his. And so cool, on to wide receivers. Which wide receiver are you loving this year?
Love, I'm gonna actually go George Pickens. I just maybe I'm gonna be guilty of falling for the preseason hype, the training camp video hype, but he's putting up all these or I guess it's one catch, but
He's had a couple, but there's also been a lot of offensive PI as well. But he's definitely had a couple of highlights so far in camp.
yeah, and the Steelers, it always feels like they have a dynamic receiver that is has the charisma and the attitude and everything, and it feels like he's going to be the next one. And so that's not really a metric or a stat, but it's just kind of a gut feel. I watch these plays and it's just yeah, I'm feeling it. The other thing is, I look, and for the most part, it looks like they're just using him for deep routes. They want to toss the ball up to him, have him go up and get it. it kind of reminds me of Mike Williams, where
Mm,
he started out and all they were doing is running him deep and he wasn't putting up big numbers. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he was a top 10 receiver until he got hurt. Um, and they started giving him some middle routes, started letting him do more than just run deep all the time. I feel like if they add that with Pickens, he can make that leap too. Where all of a sudden people are saying, "Oh, where did he come from? He's a top 10 wide receiver."
hmm.
Um, it feels like he has that. He can make that leap, and I know a lot of people are want Deontay Johnson to make that leap because of the touchdown regression, but it's when you get down in the red zone, I think it's a lot easier to go up to Pickens than it is to get it to Johnson. So I'm liking Pickens to make that leap.
Fair argument, and we'll find out in a second how I feel about the Deontay Johnson versus George Pickens argument. But no, I mean when you look at age, check Pickens has that. When you look at just overall playmaking ability, and you mix in the speed and the size of George Pickens, absolutely, I think he definitely has the upside on this team. Um, the question in this offense is the same question I ask myself before I make a trade, especially for a wide receiver, is how many other mouths in this offense are there to feed? You have Najee Harris, who I think could become a volume monster, kind of like Nick Chubb, not quite as high as Nick Chubb, but where he's going to command that type of carry load just to make defenses play the Steelers more honest, especially with young Kenny Pickett. Um, Pat Fryermuth, though, he's a super underrated tight end, and I expect him to take a really big leap this year. So I am a little hesitant on some of these Steelers wide receivers, but I do agree. I think Pickens has probably the most upside in terms of fantasy relevancy for the next couple of years.
All right, and then moving to my hate list. I'm sure you're gonna love this one. I'm gonna go with T. Higgins.
Mm,
um, I went into my rankings thinking he's a wide receiver one, and
mm-hmm.
then I put the numbers down and said, "Wait, what's going on here?" And I looked at it again, and yeah, first of all, there's a lot of competition, a lot of good young receivers right there, all competing for the wide receiver one spots. I got him way down into the wide receiver twos, and when I looked at it, I feel like at his age, he kind of is what he is. I don't see there being another big leap. I think he's entering his prime. He's going to be pretty stable for what he's been the past couple of years. And he did have an uptick when Jamar Chase got hurt last year.
Mm-hmm.
If Chase is healthy, um, I think his numbers, he's still a good receiver, but I think there's a lot of other receivers with more upside around there where yeah, I just think my value of him compared to where everyone else has, it's definitely lower. So I'm definitely down on him.
For sure. And just to make a correction earlier when we were talking about who was it? I think it was Kenneth Walker. I was looking at standard scoring for ADP versus PPR. And just to go back to that argument really quick, I have to keep scrolling because Kenneth Walker is he can't be this far down the list. No way. Um, let's just do Kenneth Walker. His current ADP in Dynasty PPR is ADP 42, running back 17. That sounds more realistic to me. I think
Yeah,
I'll still put him a little lower now, especially with the news in camp. But yeah, that's definitely there. But then so with T Higgins, kind of with the same argument. So right now T Higgins, his ADP is 31 and he's wide receiver 13 overall. So basically the number one wide receiver two. Is that kind of where you had him in your rankings, or was he even further back in the wide receiver two category?
I got T. Higgins at wide receiver 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who do you have from 15 through 18 then?
All right. So I got Amari Cooper,
Wow.
Devontae Adams, uh, George Pickens, and let's see here. Who else I got here? DJ Moore.
I won't fight you on DJ Moore, just because he's a solidified one in an offense that has no wide receiver and a quarterback that needs to have a good year throwing the ball. Um, but this is where I think we definitely disagree. I have T Higgins inside my top 12 for Dynasty for a couple of reasons. Again, Jamar Chase, he's going to get to the point where he's going to be double covered like crazy, just like Justin Jefferson is going to be. And I think that's where Jordan Addison could have a breakout season his rookie year, to where, you know, it could be the first time since AB and Juju in Pittsburgh where there's two receivers in the same team where they each have 100 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards. I can see that easily happening this year with those two. I also see the same thing happening with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is, you know, far better and more superior in terms of value and worth in Dynasty. But we got to remember, T. Higgins is on the last year of his contract this year, and he has basically stopped all contract negotiations with the Bengals. So looking past this year, if he goes to any other team in the NFL next year that does not have a solidified wide receiver one, or even a, you know, solidified wide receiver two, in my opinion, he becomes a top 8, top 9 guy just from you know, pure talent. I mean, he could go play with Mac Jones up in New England, and he's going to be someone that I have above guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'll have him probably close to the AJ Brown level. I think the CD
Wow.
Lamb. I think the CD Lamb tier is kind of where it stops. But I really like T. Higgins. I liked him ever since he played out in Clemson. I think the guy has way too much upside to ignore. So we'll agree to disagree on that one. And I did try to offer him up a couple times in our house league, and no one bought. And I'm pretty sure you've been spreading your rankings around, and that's why no one was biting to start the season of trades. So my wide receiver, I'm staying in Pittsburgh, but I am going down the line. Deontay Johnson's a guy that I really like. This guy is a target monster. Last year, I think, was just a fluke year. The guy had 0 touchdowns last year. I don't see that happening. I mean, if he can just hit, you know, 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns, these are his finishes the last 4 years. Last year, wide receiver 30, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 21, and then wide receiver 41 his rookie year. He hasn't had less than 140 targets in the last 3 years. Last year with Kenny Pickett, it was really tough for him to build chemistry last year. He had 147 targets, 86 receptions, and 882 receiving yards. Again, this guy is not going to be the big play guy like George Pickens is. Again, I agree with you on that he's not going to be the guy that he's going to be running that go route and getting the 40-yard bomb. But what he is going to be is the guy that's going to run across the field, get a 3rd and 11, get a 2nd and 4, and he's going to run those slant routes, and he's going to be a PPR monster. So I like Deontay a lot, and for the fact that he is 27, he is going to be a little bit less to purchase for non-startups, and even in startups, you're going to get him, you know, earlier on in the draft, where in PPR formats right now, Deontay Johnson is ADP. Oh, I spelled him wrong. Right now, Deontay Johnson for Fantasy Pros is wide receiver 33. He's right around ADP 77, where Pickens is currently sitting at wide receiver 30. Oh, wow, wide receiver 35. That's a lot lower than I thought he would be. Okay, but
Yeah, that's why I had him up there,
yeah,
because I saw where I had him compared to everyone else. But yeah, Deontay, I mean, everyone talks about, you know, touchdown regression. It's one of these things. He's not going to have another year of 0 touchdowns. I'm
right.
sure he'll score a touchdown maybe in the first game, and they'll pop a bottle of champagne. But I don't think he's ever a guy that's going to put up a ton of touchdowns, though. I
Agreed.
think he kind of like Robert Woods, where he's going to get you a lot of catches and yards, but I don't think he's as effective when you get in closer to the goal line. So I think he is due for some touchdowns, but I don't think he's ever going to be that touchdown monster.
Agreed. And he's the guy that, you know, in our league where we run 3 flexes, not super flex, but just a 3 flex league, even in just a standard 1 flex league, that's where I like Deontay Johnson. I don't see him in one of my wide receiver spots throughout the year. He's a guy that when I see a really good matchup and I expect him to get, you know, 7 to 10 targets, I don't need him to score every single time I put him in my lineup. If he can get me a 6 for 80 stat line on a week where I just need to plug someone in, I'm good taking 14 points off of a guy who runs primarily slants and out routes. So Deontay Johnson, yeah, he's probably my favorite wide receiver target this offseason. I've got him in a couple of leagues now, simply because I just think that the volume is just too much to ignore, and I think there's just too much opportunity in Pittsburgh. And then my wide receiver hate, I'm going back out to Seattle. It's DK Metcalf. I didn't want to put him on this list because I still really like DK. It's not that I don't like the player, it's I don't like the situation. I don't like that, Jackson Smith and Jigba is looking as good as he is in camp right now. I don't like that Tyler Lockett is still in Seattle because he's Mr. Consistent, where he just is continually a top 15 wide receiver, year in and year out. I think the last time he fell out of the top 15 was 2018, where he finished wide receiver 17. The last 4 years he's been wide receiver 13, 15, 8, and 13. And I don't expect Geno Smith to put up Pro Bowl Geno numbers again this year. I like Geno Smith. I like his story. I like that he had a great year last year. I think his years as a starter come to a close this year, and he'll kind of get back to that journeyman quarterback, kind of like a Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's just too many mouths in Seattle, and I don't think Seattle is as good as a lot of people think they are. They play in a somewhat weak division. They do have the Niners. The Rams aren't what they used to be, and the Cardinals, they're going to be probably top 2 picks next April. So
Yeah.
it's not their division. It's really, I just don't think that they're going to be able to go to teams like New York and beat the Giants, whether it's home or away. I don't think they're going to be able to go on the road and beat teams like the Vikings. I don't think they can do that. So, again, between the changing of the guard with this running back stable, and then trying to establish the run with 2 early round draft picks and Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, I just think that DK Metcalf just carries too much risk this year, especially for his current price tag. I'm good passing on him this year and going forward.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm maybe a little off of you as far as Seattle. I think they are going to be a good team this year. I think that the 49ers of them are going to do battle for this league, or for their division title. I think they are football good, but they're going to make a lot of people very sad in fantasy this year. I think at the end of the year, you might look and a lot of their guys had good statistical years throughout the year, but it's going to come a very frustrating way. I think if you have a guy like DK, there will be weeks where he single-handedly wins you your week, but
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be other weeks where he puts up complete duds. And I think it's going to be one of these games where it's very inconsistent because there's so many options. So you're going to either have to live with the bad games, or you're going to have him on your bench when he blows up and you're going to feel double bad. So I think it's going to be a very inconsistent year for their fantasy weapons. A lot of people are going to cry some fantasy tears over the Seattle weapons this year.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. All right, so we are down to tight ends before our bold takes. Again, want to make one more call out. If you're enjoying the video, again, we've had some technical difficulties today. We're going to get better at this week in, week out. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell to get all notifications. And make sure to follow us on Twitter. You can follow us for the actual podcast at TBDE Podcast on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. You can follow me at Tony TBDE. And then you can find Kevin on Twitter at Offset Kevin. So again, thank you again for watching. On to the tight ends.
The most exciting position out there.
It really is.
Yeah.
As a former tight end, I absolutely love this group, Kevin. So I love your sarcasm. I actually did not have this guy on my list until very last second, and it's because the reports came out of this new head coach in Denver and Sean Payton giving this guy accolades. It's Greg Dulcich. Sean Payton recently came out and said Greg Dulcich is going to be Denver's X factor. The same thing he said about guys like Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. When Sean Payton says that, he's not just blowing smoke. He's the type of arrogant, kind of asshole coach that's gonna, rub shit in your face, and he's gonna tell you exactly what he's gonna do. And if he's telling you Greg Dulcich is his guy, I believe him. And I think last year when he got back from his injury, I think he started around with week 8 or week 7 last year. He showed flashes of a guy that could, potentially end up being, a top 5 tight end in the next couple of years. So I'm definitely buying in on him early. And I expect with Sean Payton coming in, there being better play calling, more time management. I expect Russell Wilson to have a much better year this year than he did last year. Statistical lows and completion percentage and passing touchdowns. I think those numbers skyrocket in comparison to last year. And I don't trust Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy is still a very talented football player. I've been burned by Courtland Sutton too much. In the running game, we'll see. Javonte Williams, they said, is healthy. And, with Samaje Perine joining the squad, I think that their running game could be decent, but I think this offense is going to flow through Jerry Jeudy and Greg Dulcich because, those are the two guys that Russ is going to look for as a safety blanket. So I know you have him in our house league, and I've tried to
I
get him
do.
from you for a couple of times, but I know you see the value that I see. Why is
I'm
Dulcich
gripping
so?
him.
And why is he someone in Dynasty that you're not going to let go? I mean, we know the obvious age and everything, but why would you not let him go?
Well, he's a young tight end with potential to be up there in that elite tier. And last year, I took an odd approach. I took normal players in the early rounds of our draft, and then we got towards the late end. Uh, I was jealous of Freiermuth. I
Hmm.
wanted to have a young developmental tight end, and I went and I grabbed three because I thought I had a plethora of roster spots. So I grabbed Dulcich, I grabbed Trey McBride, is
Yep.
it?
Yep. He's
And
on. He's on.
also,
He's on my bench now. Yep.
oh yes, and Jelani Woods. And I was like,
Hmm.
let's give these three guys a chance, and I'm going to pick one of them. And when I saw Dulcich play, I was just very he's got wheels. He was a lot faster than I thought. They were throwing deep to him, and
Hmm.
I just saw the upside. And I think first game when he was back from injury, he scored a long touchdown. So yeah, he's my. I got T.J. Hawkinson as my right now guy, and then I got him as my developmental guy, and I'm looking for him to eventually be in that top five of tight ends here in a couple of years.
Yeah, two guys that have Pro Bowl level caliber talent, but also just fantastic head and shoulder type hair. I mean, their hair is like
Yes,
S tier. So, no, definitely,
jealous. Yes.
definitely, yes, I understand, Kevin. Yeah, so Dulcich, absolutely love him this year. One guy that I'm out on, and this is, not necessarily a redraft. This is where, I have to be very, very cautious of explaining why I'm avoiding this guy. It's dynasty purposes. The tight end that I hate, and I can't really say hate, it's a guy that I don't really like. It's George Kittle in San Francisco. I think there's a lot of question marks with that team. I still think they're going to win that division by at least 3 games. I know you had said that Seattle, they're going to be a good football team, not fantasy wise, but good football team wise. I see Seattle finishing 9-8. I see San Francisco finishing 12-5 at worst, 13-4 in that kind of range. The reason why I'm out on George Kittle is when you look at last year, he was starting to look a little slower. The quarterback concerns this year. I know Purdy, they're saying that he should be back before week 1. Trey Lance is still looking like a nightmare, and then Sam Darnold is potentially going to be their starter week 1. And then just the price, to if you're already drafted to get George Kittle, you're gonna have to pay the George Kittle price tag of 4 years ago, which is gonna be a lot. I think there are other options that you can get for cheaper in startups and in trades. Is you can look at Pat Freiermuth, you can look at Greg Dulcich, you can look at Jelani Woods, these younger guys who have very high ceilings. That the floors might not be as high as George Kittle. I just worry that with age could potentially come injury, and I never, factor that into my rankings and my projections. But that's something now that he's getting to the age that he is. That's something that I'm concerned about. So love George Kittle. Love him as a player. Love the situation. I just don't love him for dynasty going forward.
Yeah, no, I feel you there. He's one of these guys you watch, and he is a good football player, but the production just doesn't always match there because of all the options and the way they use people in San Francisco. So yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, I mean, Elijah Mitchell, CMC in the backfield, they could be the most electric backfield if they can both stay healthy. Brandon Ayuk, who almost was my wide receiver love this year. I only did Deontay Johnson despite you for picking George Pickens. I think Brandon Ayuk is, a future top 12 consistent wide receiver. And then Debo Samuel, Mr. Gadget, he's still the utility knife of that team, and there's just too many weapons. And I think George Kittle, his name is still brought up a lot, is because you see him perform when the team needs him to, which, does lead to fantasy production. I think there was one game last year where we had 2 really long catches, and there was one specific play that ended at the goal line and helped me get a CMC vulture touchdown. But again, I think the wheels are starting to slow down. The injuries are starting to get to him. I hope not, because I truly love watching George Kittle. Again, another one of those tight ends with just amazing hair. It's just really hard for me to want to pay the price on George Kittle this year.
No, I feel you. Uh, if I jump over to my tight end love, I like picking guys that I can't. I'm not totally sure what the pronunciation of their name is, but Cole Kmet.
Yep.
Um,
Chicago Bears.
Yeah, Chicago. I've seen him on Loveless in past years, only to kind of disappoint. But I see that offense taking a step forward. I think adding DJ Moore, they're going to stretch the field a little bit better. Um, and I think that he's a guy that's going to finally take that step forward. And the team just gave him a bunch of cash. So I think they believe in him too. And they're making that investment in him that they want him to take a step forward this year. So I think you're going to see him step up closer to the top five tight end range.
Yeah, I like him in that range, especially where, Justin Fields, there's a lot of pressure on him. Like, yes, we know he can get it done with his legs. We know he can run the ball. He doesn't want to be that quarterback though, because he knows what happens to quarterbacks in this league. Even the bigger quarterbacks that are, mobile but, can take a hit, they get hurt eventually, right? And so I think with him, finding a safety blanket like Cole Kmet, getting DJ Moore was huge. Chase Claypool, jury's still out on that one. But yeah, totally. I think as soon as DJ Moore starts burning defenses, and I think that the Bears, they did run the ball more than any other team last year. I think they continually do that with a stable of running backs: Deontay Foreman, Khalil Herbert, Bijan Robinson's shadow of Roshan Johnson. I think there's a lot of guys on this team that's going to open it up for Fields to make those plays, and I definitely think Cole Kmet's one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my hate, he'll probably end up burning me because I've seen him on people's love list, but Dallas Goddard. Um, I just I'm looking at him and he's at that point, we're looking at dynasty rankings, he kind of is what he is. He's right in his prime. He's not going to get any better, I don't believe. And but he's going to still be at his level for a couple more years. But you look at that offense, AJ Brown, he's a stud. He's going to stay being a stud. Smith got better as the year went on, and I think that's going to continue going on. He's going to take a step forward. Um, and I think your hate guy, Swift, um, I think he's going to catch a lot of passes. And if you look at Goddard, compared to some of the other tight ends, he's more of a short, uh,
Hmm.
short air yards and then a lot of yards after the catch compared to the other ones. And I think that's going to get eaten into by Swift. So, and the other thing too is Philly. Everyone is expecting they're going to be a very good football team, very good defense, and they have a pretty full running back room. So I think they're going to get leads and they're going to start running the ball. And so I think Goddard's the one that's going to kind of take the step back and pay the price from them, the game script, and also just some other guys that are going to eat into his opportunities.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, I like Dallas Goddard again as a player. I really don't like him as a situation. I mean, he is 28. At 6'5", 256, he is on the bigger side for tight ends. He is a really good passing tight end. He can get involved in the running game, and I think that kind of adds to his strengths is a lot of these, play action runs where he'll draw out a run block and he will take a, 7-yard dig or a 5-yard out or something. I think that's kind of where his ceiling is. Like, will he make some bigger plays down the field? Absolutely. I mean, every tight end is going to at some point or another. But you're right. I think Swift, him coming in, he is going to be the primary pass catching back. And that is going to take away from Goddard because when it comes to who can get more open, it's going to be DeAndre Swift versus a mismatched linebacker compared to Dallas Goddard, who might have, a top tier safety sitting on top of him. So, yeah, I definitely see Dallas Goddard having a downswing this year. I still see him being a top, 5 or 6 tight end. But again, when it comes to what it's going to cost to get him, both in startups and in trades, I just would rather go with a guy like Pat Fryermuth or one of those developmental guys we've talked about.
Yeah,
All
and I'm
right.
pretty down. I was just looking at my numbers they added to. I got him as tight end 9.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where I would have him. I mean, I have not in any particular order. I think I have Pitts, Andrews, Kelsey. I think I have Hawkinson. I think Kittle is up there too. Fryermuth is up there. And then I think I might have Goddard right around like my tight end 7, right around there. So all right, well, that is our love hate list for 2023. And again, these rankings do matter for redraft leagues, right? There are short-term impacts on this upcoming season, but we're also looking at these for future value, whether it's trade value, whether it's a player's age or situation. So make sure you take that with a grain of salt. This is the part of the show I was really excited about. This is where we're going to circle back here come January with our bold takes for the year. Kevin, you didn't tell me what yours was, so I'm excited to see if you really shock me or not. So, what's your bold take for this fantasy season?
Well, hopefully it's bold enough. But I know when we talked earlier, you were making the case for, loving some of these older guys for what they're going to give you this year.
Hmm.
Um, I'm more of an old man hater. I'm the one that's going to be, taking away dad's car keys and saying you can't drive anymore. I have a couple of guys that I think are going to enter old man territory, big names that we're used to seeing up top. But I think this is the year that Derrick Henry finishes outside the RB1 territory. And I also think Stephon Diggs is going to drop out of wide receiver one territory, and you're going
Wow,
to see those guys fade. So I
wow.
got Derrick Henry and Stephon Diggs both out of number one territory, outside the top 10.
I got to ask. So the Stephon Diggs, I can see him falling out of the wide receiver one simply because of the talent coming in at wide receiver. Right, there's a lot of new guys in this league that really can take that step up, and I expect there to be at least one rookie this year, whether that's JSN out in Seattle or even Zay Flowers in Baltimore. I guess he's looked really good. I don't expect him to be a wide receiver one this year, but you never know. Um, you know, with Derrick Henry though, still expecting him to be that workload back in Tennessee. What's your logic? Is it strictly age, or is it a combination of things with the Tennessee Titans?
It's a combination of it all. I don't know about I know that the Titans just added DeAndre Hopkins. I'm also worried about him having the Julio Jones effect happen to him. It's about that age.
Yep.
Um, and Derrick Henry, he's hitting that age where they decline. And earlier I said that Nick Chubb, didn't have that as many carries as some of the other guys that you think of as feature backs. Henry has those carries. Henry has a
Hmm.
lot of years with 350 yards rushing. He had a lot of carries at Alabama. Um, I get it that he's a physical specimen. So is Adrian Peterson, but eventually they do take that step down.
Hmm.
And it just feels like this is the year that I think I'm just not a believer in the Tennessee Titans, and I think that Derrick Henry is his yards per carry are gonna go down, and he's not gonna do a whole lot in the passing game. And this is the year that you see him fade out of the wide receiver, or sorry, running back one territory.
For sure. No, that's a fair argument. And I think for those who do already have Derrick Henry in dynasty leagues, myself included, that's kind of what
Oh
you have.
yes.
It's kind of what you have to expect at this point. Anything above a high end to mid tier running back two, you really are getting your hopes up too much, right? Derrick Henry is, he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's what is he, 28 going on this year? Derrick Henry is 29 already. I
Let's
think
see here.
yeah, he's 29. I think he just turned 29 during camp.
Yep,
Um,
29.
but I mean, fourth overall PPR running back last year. It, as a Derrick Henry owner in our house league, if he finishes in the top 15, to be completely honest, I still think I hit the jackpot on him. I did have to pay up for him when I did get him 2 years ago, but he almost won me two championships. So um, still a guy that I think if you can get for the right price, he's the kind of veteran you want to target. Again, Dynasty isn't always about having the youngest team because the goal of Dynasty is still to win. Whether you have empire styles where you have to win it so many years in a row or within a certain time frame to truly win the league, or if it's just a year to year dynasty league, having guys like Derrick Henry where you can get towards the ending parts of their career at a better price, getting Derrick Henry to hopefully expect to finish as a running back two, I'll take that every day. Just like if I can get Tyler Lockett for a good price, you need these veteran presences on your team that carry more consistency than upside, and that's really what you need to have to really build a true contending dynasty team.
Yeah,
So
you don't want to be the trust the process
exactly,
76ers here. You do actually want to win some games, but
exactly,
yeah, always keeping an eye that you also want to win some games next year as well.
exactly. And I'll figure out my team next year because I think my youngest guy is Trey McBride, and the youngest starter that I have on my team I think is Christian McCaffrey at 27. So all right, so my bold take, and I truly believe that this is something that could happen. It might be a little bold, but My bold take is Lamar Jackson not only finishes this year as QB1, but he finishes and wins this year as the NFL MVP. I truly think that with the investment that the front office has made in that team, specifically on offense, this is by far the best offense that Lamar has had in his entire career. Mark Andrews is still a top flight elite tight end, a great route runner, and Odell Beckham Jr., who's not going to be, the guy that was making, highlight catches up in New York. I think if he can at least be, year one Cleveland Browns Odell Beckham Jr., I think that, that definitely helps him out and gives him more upside than he has in recent years. And then you throw in Rashad Bateman. If he can stay healthy, I think he's a top riser for wide receivers in this league, who I think is someone you can get relatively cheap right now in Dynasty. And then
Go
rookies,
Gophers.
go Gophers. And then Ski Yuma, row the boat. I think Zay Flowers, with the reports out of camp, he's looked like an NFL player. Like, it's one thing to come into camp as a rookie and be up to speed, but when people are in scouts and these coaches are saying he looks like an NFL player day one, that's huge. And if Zay Flowers can do what he did at Boston College and do everything after the catch, that's going to help Lamar. And Lamar's biggest thing the last couple of years that has really stunted his fantasy project, excuse me, his production, was the latter half of the year, the last 4 or 5 weeks where he's injured his leg and has missed fantasy playoffs. I mean, that's killed so many teams, where if he can rely on sitting in the pocket an extra second and getting the ball to a playmaker, it's going to make him stay healthy longer, and it's going to also uptick his production. So I don't know. What's your take on Lamar? Do you think he can get back to his MVP stature, or do you think that he is going to be one of those guys that slowly starts to taper off and kind of start going into that abysmal quarterback purgatory like we've seen so much in the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, I mean, if this take was an easy layup, it wouldn't be bold.
That's
So,
true.
so to surpass Josh Allen and Mahomes, it's going to take a lot. But I mean, Jackson was the QB1 a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of unknowns that have to fall into place for that. So yeah, Zay Flowers, uh, he's, I mean, there's good buzz, but it has to hold true when the regular season games start. Bateman needs to actually stay healthy and be effective. And I have no idea what to expect from Beckham. But if those pieces fall into place, then absolutely he can actually start putting up passing numbers that would be better than he's put up his whole career, and then mix in his runs. I think they might even want to scale back his runs a little bit,
Oh,
given how he was hurt
100%.
last year. But
100%.
it could happen, but a lot of things have to fall in the right direction.
That's exactly why I made that bold take, Mr. Kevin. Well, awesome. We appreciate you joining us for episode 1. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. We don't have a set schedule yet. We're still working on that, hashtag dad life. But we are going to try and get some consistency. Make sure to follow us on Twitter for all in-season highlights. We'll have weekly ranking updates. We'll have waiver wire pickups. We'll do probably something kind of like this love-hate as we go throughout the season to start looking towards, second half of the year and into next season. So make